Four
Yeah,
kids.
1 son and 3 daughters. Yeah. And this is when Matt was a little guy. Aww. And yeah, I mean, these memories, I'm glad we never throw this stuff out.
Yeah.
You know? And there's my wife, Arlene, and there's those 4 kids. That's actually back in Winnipeg. And oh, look at that. Oh, we've changed. My hair was not as gray there.
You look really young there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't anymore?
Well,
okay, well, anyway, so Matt, this is great, because then, you start reading it. He's got this poem for mothers. Very kind, always caring, there for you when you need her, excellent with children, mothers are loving and understanding.
And great penmanship, Matt, for
sure. Way to go,
at a young age. Now, I will admit, I forgot my mother's third craft. It's literally sitting at my front door. So, but I have pictures of the boys in the past, and so every Mother's Day, that's a couple years back.
Hair's changed.
Yeah, it has changed. And every Mother's Day, they, make me breakfast, so it's usually an omelet. There they are, getting the omelet ready, and a croissant, and usually a French vanilla cappuccino on the side. So it's funny because now that Ethan's older, he kind of leads the way and wakes up Dad and says, "Dad, we have to go make the omelet. Get that ready." And I pretend that I'm asleep and I don't hear anything. But I love those breakfasts.
Well, Josh is just into it too.
Give him a job and he will do it well. So I love those memories.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know you're a great mom, and I've got a chance to meet your kids a little bit too, and you're doing a great job.
Aw, thanks, Greg. Well, somebody else that's doing a great job is our guest Bible teacher all this week, Cheryl McLeod. She continues to share some words of inspiration for all the moms out there. This
book that we've been talking about this month, and you're doing segments with Pastor Franklin. We'll get around to that a little bit later on, but Love Like You've Never Been Hurt Before is one of our best books. You got Love Like You've Never Been Hurt, and so we're going to talk more about that, but we're looking forward to that later on.
Absolutely. And our guest today is for all those moms out there that aren't sure if what they're doing is making a difference in their kids' lives. I will say that I'm one of those moms that needs to listen very carefully to this next interview. Here's Cheryl with a mom and daughter.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having us. It's great to be here. Yeah.
I can't wait to hear from both of you. We're going to start with you, Rebecca. You wrote this book, Why Kids Didn't Rebel, or Why I Didn't Rebel. You interviewed your friends, you did research, but also you told your own story. So how come you didn't do what I did? How come you didn't rebel?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Right?
It is.
When I started writing this book, I honestly wasn't actually sure what the actual reason was, because it wasn't that there was one thing that made me stay following God's path for my life. It was a really complicated kind of myriad of things that all worked together. And so I really had to tease it apart by doing interviews and really reading back. I even read my old journals to look through my thought process back then. And really what we found is that a lot of the things that helped me and other kids not rebel were not what we're often told in the church is what works. It's actually a little deeper than what we're often told in parenting advice or with the sermons at church. It goes a little deeper.
Well, we want to dive into some of those reasons, but I just want to, Sheila, I want to ask you, and kudos to you too, because your mom's like rather well known,
yes,
as a writer and blogger, and sometimes that makes it harder sometimes for kids not to rebel, because it's hard, that public light, that spotlight, that busy life. You wanted her to write this book. Tell me what it was about, what you were hearing from her that made you think, yeah, she needs to let other people know.
Well, it started from a blog post. I have a large blog at tolovehonor.vacuum.com, and I was getting into these fights in the comment section every time I wrote about parenting teens, because I would say things like, here's how to steer kids well, and parents would say, no matter what you do, kids are going to rebel. And I'd be like, oh, that's just so fatalistic. And they wouldn't listen to me. So I said to Rebecca, who was 19 at the time, could you just write me a blog post on why you didn't rebel? And she said no. And then one day she was bored in a stats class at university. She wrote it in 20 minutes. I put it up, and it was seen by like 1 million people the next month.
Wow.
Totally viral.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, good for you, and I hope this does encourage people today. I found it interesting because one of the themes that seemed to be about a lot of things you found was open communication with your parents. Things like respect for your kids, great relationships, explaining why behaviors are wrong, not just demanding obedience from them. So explain to me why a great relationship, open relationship with your parents matters.
Well, I think that often when you look at teenagers as these inevitably rebellious beings, they stop being people a lot of times in our minds, and they start just being this potential disaster.
And sometimes teenagers don't seem like people. Like there's
Oh my
moments,
goodness.
right?
We're crazy. I say we. I'm not a teenager anymore. I say we, but no, they can be
There's
really
moments of craziness, hormonal
Completely.
pure craziness.
But when you're able to get past that and look at them as the person that God has created them to be, we start to shift our mindset. And a lot of that shifts the expectations we have around rebellion. The idea that, no, this isn't just a hormone-filled 14-year-old. This is also a person who God can use for great things and who has the ability to make good decisions. And that changes how parents interact with their kids, just having that different expectation around behavior.
You talk about that in the book. You expect bad things sometimes. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But when you expect kids to step up and they see that belief from you, lots of times they do step up. I think that's so good. And another thing you shared in your book is that you struggle with emotional regulation. Like I think a lot of kids, especially like in that hormone, women especially, 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, like there's this time of crazy, right? And you would behave sometimes inappropriately or outbursts and things like that. And Sheila, I think about you as a mom, you know, like you can respond, react, I think is the word, as a mom to that, and react wrongly, but you were able to just keep that vision of who she was and not kind of react to that. How did you do that?
Actually, I would say that I didn't. This
Really?
was one of the areas where I really parented badly, and that's one thing that when Rebecca was writing the book, I said to her, you got to put all the stuff I did wrong in there, like, because this is not about being a perfect parent. Not, you know, raising a kid who doesn't rebel is not about parenting perfectly. It's just about being authentic. And Keith and I, my husband and I, when Rebecca would get moody or when she would have tantrums or just not be able to, she'd be so stressed for an exam, she wouldn't be able to calm down. We didn't handle that well, you know? But in the end, what we could do is we could go say, we're sorry. And wow, did we ever blow that?
That's
you know?
huge.
And she was allowed to say, Mom, you were wrong.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing in a family.
That goes back to that relationship again, the healthy relationship.
Exactly, and that's what I found. I interviewed 25 young adults, both who rebelled and who didn't, and I found that there wasn't a single kid who said, my parents did nothing wrong. It wasn't about never doing anything wrong. It was about how do you handle it when you do something wrong, right? Do you apologize, or do we try to kind of maintain control? Do you go and humble yourself and say, yeah, this was wrong? Now, you screaming at me because you were hormonal and emotional was also wrong, but the way I handled it wasn't beneficial.
And you're modeling how you want your kids to respond back to you by doing it first.
Completely.
I hope a lot of parents just took a deep breath and said, okay, you know, I cannot be perfect and still have good kids. You know, I mean, I think parents need to hear that. That's a message that you need to hear. We have many more tips to unpack for you on how you can steer your kids right in life. Stay with us.
Still to come on 100 Huntley Street.
I found that kids who didn't rebel were not only raised to be good kids, they were raised to be good adults. And that's a very big difference in mindset.
I find often people don't realize how much God deeply cares for them. Often they are so burdened by condemnation and self-accusation. They just think God must be angry at them, and surely they've done a sin that's too great for God. And that's what I find I pray over a lot, that they have a spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of Jesus, and that they know that they're God's beloved. That, I think, is one of the most powerful things to communicate and pray, is that Jesus always accepts them. He always loves them. You can just sense, and they tell you, I feel like a burden has lifted. And hearing those things just make it so beautiful, and you yourself rejoice in your own salvation and what God's done in your life. It's just the best feeling in the world. It really is.
We are back with Rebecca Gregoire Lindenbach talking about her book, Why I Didn't Rebel, and her mom, Sheila, rejoins us to unpack some tips for parents. Thanks for coming back, sticking around. You know, Rebecca, I want to talk about faith because, you know, you very clearly say in this book, studies are showing that kids that belong to faith communities do better in life and they don't rebel. And, you know, it's a good positive impact on so many lifestyle things. But there's a caveat. You say they have to own their faith, not just go to church. So what is the difference and how did that work out in your life?
Yeah, well, as I was writing this book, I was thinking about people who I had experienced in the past who grew up and they were the great kids in the youth group. They were involved in everything. But as soon as they became adults, it's like the faith never really stuck. They just kind of left, and it didn't seem to impact them at all. And I was really trying to figure out what the deal was, and it really amplified this difference between treating your family like a team versus treating your family and the church like a club. And it's...
What's the difference between those two?
Well, a club, I'll explain club, you explain team.
Exactly.
Okay, so a club is something where you exist because you like spending time together. And so your identity is in being part of this club, and everything we do is building up the club so that we can do more things. And a lot of times churches are like that. And so kids might be really involved in a church, and parents might be volunteering like crazy in the church, but everything you do seems to be perpetuating the club, so it doesn't really do anything outside of that club. So it doesn't have any bigger, higher purpose.
Like practical life application for your daily life. So if you're building your family as a team and faith, how does that look different?
Well, a team is different from a club because it has a purpose, right? You have a goal that you're working towards. So you need to be equipped. You work on training your players so that they are able to deal with whatever challenges come their way. You know, you do drills if you're on a soccer team. You run all sorts of practices to make sure you're prepared. And it's the same way I found that kids who didn't rebel were not only raised to be good kids, they were raised to be good adults. And that's a very big difference in mindset. Are you preparing kids to simply be a good teenager? Or are we preparing our kids to be responsible when we enter the adult world? But on top of that, probably the most important part is that faith for these families and for families like ours went outside of the four walls of the church. Right? It wasn't just that if we were volunteering, we weren't only volunteering on the worship team and in the nursery. We did that. But we also did things like, I remember growing up, a big tradition for us was we'd get the catalogs where you could, send a goat to a family in somewhere
Cambodia or
somewhere across the world. And every Christmas it was so exciting because we'd get, we'd have a budget that we could donate to all these places. And it's talking about how does the kingdom of God actually impact the world? And how can you be a part of that outside of just the pizza nights and foosball at youth group?
I interview people all the time who have a cultural faith. They grew up and they consider themselves a Christian, but not necessarily have a relationship with Jesus. And sometimes there's this moment where they realize, wait a minute, this is more just my culture than actually how I live. Sheila, what would you say as a parent is the difference between getting your kids to live that faith as opposed to just be part of a culture?
Well, obviously you have to model it, but I think it's more than that. I expected them to know and love God. Like, I remember one of the things I said over and over again when they were teenagers and they had to make a decision was, well, you have the Holy Spirit just as much as I do. So, so God should be able to speak to you. And look at how many times God speaks to teenagers in the Bible. And yet we seem to forget that our kids know God, and I expected them to. And that's a big thing, is expectations, because I think often we expect that kids won't come into their own till they're adults, but I expected them to do things for God, and so they did.
I love that. I see just so many kids that don't find their way. And one thing I really liked about what you did is that you admitted that you don't have all the answers, which is kind of seems like a scary approach. Like, I think a lot of parents would think, my kid's going to walk away because I can't give her everything tied up perfectly. But actually that would create an unrealistic expectation of what it's like to be a follower of Jesus.
Yeah, and if you look at millennials and Generation Z's, like, one of their biggest concerns is social justice and seeing, fixing the problems in the world. And they don't see things in black and white the way that our generation does. And I think when parents expect that their kids will always have a black and white answer to everything, they might do their kids a disservice. So one thing that we did around the dinner table, my husband and Becca would debate all the time. Like, we would debate theology, we would debate everything. And if she could ever stump Keith, like, that was great. But we didn't always have to see things exactly the same way as long as we were following Jesus, and that gave them a lot of freedom.
Well, and my dad even said, like, he would say to me, people have been debating theology for 2,000 years. We probably don't have it right today either, right? So it was the different mindset versus you must believe exactly this in order to,
which is another thing you talk about in the book is that kind of rule-driven, only one way kind of thing versus relationship. There's so much more. We're out of time that you can unpack from this book, Why I Didn't Rebel. It's available on our e-store, so if you want to get a copy of it, make sure to go there and check that out. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having us.
And if you're a parent and you need a little encouragement, maybe you have a child like I was, it's a little off the beaten path, and you just want someone to pray with you in agreement, I tell you what, the prayers of my parents are the reason that I am still here on this earth, literally alive. Thank you, Mom and Dad. We would love to pray with you. That number is 1-866-273-4444. We'll be right back.
And I got a phone call from the house where our middle son, Josiah, was staying. And she just said, Jeanette, it's not good. Josiah dove into the pool, and it's not good.
My phone was bombarded by a series of texts. It's a 911 emergency, call home, call home. So when we did, Jeanette is not herself, screaming, where are you, where are you? And I just landed, baby, what's going on? They took him. And they took who? And then she tells me the story. And my heart sinks. I remember just asking God, take my life, please. Please let my son live. 1% chance to live. I was thinking, is it the last time I saw my son alive? Then it wasn't until we got a phone call from a doctor we had never met before. What took us 4 hours took him 4 minutes. He had called us and said, I just spoke with your surgeon who is looking at Josiah right now. Your son's gonna be okay.
It was about an 8-hour surgery, and there's, you know, he's got some stuff in his neck, and you will see a scar if you see the back of him, but otherwise you would have no idea, you know, that he ever went through anything. He's literally a complete miracle.
One night when I walked into Josiah's room in Atlanta, he was weeping, he was crying. And he said, Dad, I almost died. As I was rubbing his head and scratching his back, my hand hit that scar. And immediately God spoke to me. And I said, Josiah, do you see the scar? Do you feel it? He said, yeah, Daddy. Never allow this to speak of death. You only allow this to speak of God's mercy and of God's grace and of God's love for your life. People in this world have scars. And I encourage those that when the enemy is telling you that you're not and you're nothing, or that you're an orphan, or that you had the abortion, it's not about what happened to you. It's about how you respond to what happens to you that makes you an overcomer.
What a powerful story. You know, God is still in the business of doing miracles. I know sometimes we don't always see the conclusion that we want to see, but in this case, that young fellow was healed, Josiah, and you know, he has that scar now as a result of what he went through, and his parents are so grateful. And as we're heading towards Mother's Day, and you know, we're thinking about, you know, parents and our moms and some of the challenges that we've all been through, God is there in the midst of it. And as I listened to Jeanette and Ricardo and their story, and hearing how that God was with them and how they felt his presence during that difficult time, I hope that as you're going through whatever you're going through, you know, you might be on the mountaintop right now, things are going great, or you might be, you know, down in the valley and feeling a lot of pain. Please know that we have people always standing by to take your calls, prayer partners. We get more than 1,200 phone calls each and every day, people hurting, going through difficulty. So call our prayer lines right now, 1-866-273-4444. Well, right now we're going to tackle the tricky topic of forgiveness. And here's Maggie John with her guest in today's message on loving those around us.
All this month, we're talking about love and forgiveness with Pastor Jensen Franklin, the author of this great new book, Love Like You've Never Been Hurt. There are some misconceptions when we talk about forgiveness. Tell us about some of them.
Well, I think one of them is, you know, you hear this saying, forgive and forget. That if you really forgive somebody, you just forget what they did to you. And that's absolutely not true. Forgiveness is not amnesia. Forgiveness is not getting a lobotomy to where you can't think rationally and remember what somebody did that was really, really hurtful to you. But forgive and forget means you remember it differently. It actually becomes a point of reference from which you look back on and say, that happened, but I don't see that person the same way. Because God has so helped us progress and move from that place of hurt to healing that it happened, but it actually, you know, it's kind of like when things happen in a marriage. If you stay, one of the greatest things that'll happen in a marriage is if you make it through the battles. I know I've been married for 30 years to the same woman. And if you stay together, you actually get stronger after the battles, after the struggles. You can get stronger. It's amazing. In New Zealand, I'll be there in a couple of weeks preaching. I've been there many times. You go, I like to run, I'm a jogger, and you see all these birds, and they do not have wings. They have little stubs for wings. They walk around, you run, and they just part. They don't fly away like birds normally do. And I asked somebody one time, why do y'all have, I looked it up, 41% of the birds on the island of New Zealand cannot fly. Wow. And the reason is there are no predators on that island. There are no snakes, there are no foxes. There's nothing, the only predators are in the sky, hawks and eagles. And so the rest of the birds, many of them, since there's no need to fly, they never exercise their wings, therefore their wings are dwarfed. And they lose the ability to fly. It's the opposition that actually gives us the power to fly. It actually takes the opposition. It takes the fight. It takes the struggle. When an airplane takes off, the pilot wants to know one thing: what direction is the wind blowing into? That's the direction I've got to fly into to get something called lift, to bring it up. I'm saying to people who are listening to me right now that if you're going through opposition, if people are attacking you, it's not coming to tear you up, it's coming to carry you up. God's saying the only way you're going to get your wings is if opposition comes to you. And so you begin to see it almost as if they meant it for my evil, like Joseph said, but God means it for my good. And so if you'll ever learn that when opposition and when hurt and when betrayal comes, I can either let it tear me up or God wants to use it to carry me up.
That's a good word. I know that many times when I've gone through struggles, I've said to God, God, let me learn the lesson that you want me to learn so that I don't have to go through this again. And so I hope that you are encouraged by that today. Maybe you need to get this book, or maybe you need to get it into the hands of somebody that you know and love that needs to be able to let go, learn from the opposition, and learn how to fly. The book is called Love Like You've Never Been Hurt. Watch this.
The human heart was created with a great capacity to love, but along with that comes a great capacity to feel pain, wounds from those who are closest to us. Can you relate?
Do you need your family to be reconciled? Do you have relationships that are breaking your heart? How long has it been since you spoke to somebody you care about? You need the book, Love Like You've Never Been Hurt. I wrote it with you in mind. I believe God has a now message for your life. Fight for your marriage. Fight for your children. Fight for your grandchildren. Fight for peace. Fight for restoration, reconciliation. This is no time to give up on your family. If you'll read this book, He'll give you a blueprint plan of what happened for me and my family. I know God can make happen for your family.
We'll send you a copy as our thanks for a suggested gift of $50 or more this month. This is a 100% viewer-supported program. We can't do it without you. To enjoy more of 100 Huntley Street, please call with your donation today, 1-800-265-3100, or visit crossroads.ca/donate.
I don't know about you, but I have been so challenged by the segments that Maggie's been doing with Pastor Franklin. I just love that. I want to fly, but I don't want to have to go through all those hard things in order to have that happen in my life. You know, the opposition, the betrayal, all those kinds of things. But God actually uses it. You know, in my years of traveling with the Voice of the Martyrs and the persecuted church and talking to many of the believers in these places, they said it's actually the persecution that's made us stronger. So again, get this book by Pastor Franklin, Love Like You've Never Been Hurt. And for your best ministry gift, we'd love to get it into your hands. You know, we're a ministry that wants to have great Bible teaching, and we've had a great teacher this week in Cheryl McLeod talking about motherhood.
A mom is a comedian because she's the primary source of happiness in her child's life. The resounding call of your days is to stir up joyful moments and then to splash liberally in those experiences with your children. Teach your children that it really is more fun to serve the Lord rather than to be in the bondage to the lies of the culture. Celebrate every day with your children as a rare and precious gift that's worth more than corporate promotions, stocks and bonuses, and career prestige. Sing silly and sweet songs with your children because you can never have too much music in your home. Tell jokes to your children. Why not treat them to the joke of the day at the dinner table every evening? Teach your kids that life is more abundant when there's something to be happy and to laugh about. You know, school is hard and kids are mean and life isn't always fair, but moms can always deliver the rich gift of genuine joy. Make cookies with your children on an ordinary afternoon. Play with Play-Doh and don't get frustrated because they've made a mess. Let your children use glitter often. Play dress up with your children and travel to make-believe places together. Make green mashed potatoes on St. Patrick's Day. And on April Fool's Day, serve hamburgers for breakfast and pancakes for supper. Teach your children to celebrate, to laugh, and to sing. Make sure that your children believe that their home is the best place in the entire world simply because you are the mom at their house. You know, one of my goals as a mother was to ensure that my home was the happiest home on the street. I definitely wasn't the coolest mom or the youngest mom or the skinniest mom or the richest mom, but my home was a place of unreserved joy, laughter, and music. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A joyful heart is good medicine."
Oh, what good reminders, Carol. It makes me think I'm not a fun parent.
What?
You know, I think those are, like, when she talked about playing with Play-Doh and not worrying about it being a mess, I should take a picture of Joshua's room right now.
Okay.
There's Play-Doh in the carpet for sure. Mommy, I was just playing with my Play-Doh. But yeah, those things you do have to just shrug off every once in a while.
Yeah, and I love what she said too about you know, the fact that there's lots of laughter in the home. And I mean, Arlene sometimes would say to me, said, "Greg, we have 4 kids, not 5. You need to be a parent here. You're the adult here." But no, we did have a lot of fun, and you know, really want our kids to dream and it to be a safe place. I mean, I think when I go home, I like it personally to be a safe place, and I want that for my kids, grandkids, and even for the neighborhood kids, that they would feel safety in our home. And I know Arlene, she's done an amazing job over the years making it a safe place and a fun place too.
Yeah, I think that's a good challenge, especially, because you know, you think about this world today, and you kind of have to make that safe place for children. Especially, I love what Carol said about being able to be an open space where your child can talk, and a safe place where your child can talk about their feelings. That is so important, and that's always my prayer every single day, that both of my boys will know that the home is a safe place, and mom is a safe place to talk to.
And you know, one thing too is I find, and Arlene's given me some great advice on this, no matter what they tell you, you just try to respond calmly.
Yeah.
You know, if they've said, "Dad, I had an accident with your car."
Yeah.
"Oh, are you okay?" Rather than, "What?" And again, I think we do as parents, with God's help, and I don't know what would have happened in my marriage with my family without the Lord's help. And that's why we're here each and every day, trying to give you practical tips to know that we're cheering you on to be great parents, great grandparents, so that you can have the kind of children that, that the world would be proud of.
Yeah, absolutely, and you'll be proud of.
Yeah.
Looking forward to tomorrow. Our guest will be Diane Doko Kim, and she's going to talk about parenting a child with some developmental challenges. And so all this week, we're talking about different aspects of being a mom, so it'll be a good show for you to watch tomorrow as well, or if you have a friend that can relate to Diane's story, you're going to watch it. You're going to want to watch it. Well, thanks again for joining us today.
See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a member of the Canadian Council of Christian Charities. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 4M2.
This program sponsored in part by DL Deeks Insurance, home of the Evangelical Group Plan. For quality service and great rates on your auto, property,